Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Samantha Woon and my co-host here, Jeffrey Halley. It's the 21st of March, Thursday, and our guest today is David Kuo, founder of the Smart Investor in Singapore. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Salamat Tengah, how are you two?
Good.
Happy Thursday, David. Let's cause you some pain initially and have a look around Asia's market performance today, and we'll get your comments on that. And we all know that you love talking about short-term moves in the market. So around Asia today, definitely seems to be some post-FOMC glow going on here. The Nikkei 225 is up 2.1%. Shanghai is down to 0.2%, really an outlier today. Hong Kong, meanwhile, has rallied by 1.72%. Down in Australia, the ASX 200 is up 1.16%. South Korea's Kospi has rallied by 2.34%. Singapore is up 1.05%, while KL has risen just 0.24%. David, what are your thoughts? It's a fairly impressive performance in Asia today.
Yeah, pretty good. And I think let's focus in on China. You know, why is China the outlier at the moment? And I just saw across the news wires this morning that yet another property developer has defaulted on its bonds. This one is Radis. I think it's a relatively small property developer, but nevertheless, I think it's actually sort of giving some people some pause for thoughts over in China that these property developers are a drag on the market, and until such time that property developers get themselves sorted out somehow, consumers aren't really going to feel that healthy. But you're right about the rest of the markets. It is that afterglow from what happened over in the Fed over in New York last night.
Mm-hmm. So since we're on that topic, stock markets rallied overnight after the FOMC left rates unchanged and indicated that its three-cut outlook remained on track. David, please walk us through the meeting outcome and your key takeaways from it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I stayed up until 2 a.m. Singapore time waiting for the FOMC, and what a waste of time it was. Yeah. He did absolutely nothing. Yeah. Throughout that entire period, and even the press conference was absolutely a washout. Having said that, what he did say was that the American economy is growing, that unemployment is relatively low, and that he thinks that inflation should slowly start to abate. And so therefore, he says that monetary policy at the moment is restrictive enough, which therefore means that he doesn't really have to do an awful lot. But people were jumping on the bandwagon that maybe there could be 3 rate cuts this year. I personally can't see it, because I just think that why would you want to do that now? You know, when things are going so well, why fix something that isn't broke? I mean, the economy is not broken. Unemployment is not broken. Inflation is coming down slowly by itself. There is absolutely no need for the Federal Reserve to start cutting interest rates. But I think what he did say was that it's going to be a case of slowly catchy monkey. And so therefore, he's not going to actually jump into cutting interest rates, because he wants to ensure that inflation is definitely out of the way before he does something, Samantha.
Okay, thank you, David. So let's turn our attention to a regional giant that investors should be thinking about more often, Indonesia. Yeah. Yesterday, the Electoral Commission formally declared Prabowo Subianto the winner of the presidential election, and he will be sworn in as president in October. So he has a hard act to follow, replacing the popular Joko Widodo, or widely known as Jokowi. David, can we expect changes in Indonesia? And also, what is your outlook for the country under Prabowo's presidency?
You know, surprisingly, Samantha, I think Jeffrey might be better placed to actually talk about this than me. But, you know, as an outsider, somebody who is not biased in any way, I will give you my take, and then Jeff can actually sort of tear down my thoughts. Personally, I think that Indonesia has an awful lot of infrastructure building to take care of. And I think that alone will keep Prabowo reasonably sort of occupied during his term as presidency. don't think he's going to try and do anything that will upset the apple cart. The other thing, of course, is this $35 billion move of the capital, Jakarta, to over in Sabah. And I think that alone is going to take him a tremendous amount of resources and a tremendous amount of his time. So I think in general, I don't think investors need to worry too much. Having said that, investors are generally quite cautious. So I think what they will do is to sit on their hands for a while and then just wait and see what happens. I mean, one of the things that I noticed that Jokowi did was that he wants to ensure that commodities aren't just sort of siphoned out from Indonesia. And he wants processing to be done within Indonesia, in particular something like nickel, which is going to be used quite heavily in the electric vehicle space. So I think everything is aligned for Indonesia at the moment. And without being rude, I just hope that Prabowo doesn't spoil things, because I mean, the last 2 terms under Jokowi was great, and I think the Indonesian economy benefited greatly from that. So don't do anything too drastic, and I think Indonesia will be fine for investors.
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to lose Sri Mulyani, who's the finance minister, very, very highly regarded, ex-World Bank, I believe, head. And I believe her replacement, I think, will be quite critical later in the year as well, as far as investors go. But generally, I believe that, and I should tell viewers, I'm actually living in Jakarta. I'm based here. I believe that they voted for continuity in this election, and that was very much Prabowo as the candidate.
And just on another point, I mean, I do invest in Indonesia indirectly. So I own shares in a company called Jardine Cycle and Carriage, which has a huge exposure over in Indonesia. And I just think that as far as I'm concerned, rather than taking huge amounts of risk by jumping in with both feet, I kind of do it separately through another company, and I let them take all the risks that are involved in investing over in Indonesia, Samantha.
Thanks for sharing, David.
Not a bad strategy, that one. I think. After all, it is still Indonesia. David,
that was uncalled for, Jeff. Right?
When you live here and try to move around Jakarta, you'll very quickly find why people sometimes have a love-hate relationship with the city. It's marvelous on one side, drives you mad on the other.
Okay,
David, there's one more day till Friday, which is always a reason to be very happy in my mind. But you've been looking at the World Happiness Report. So tell us, who is the world's happiest country?
Well, I'll leave you on tenterhooks for a little while. I'll tell you at the very end which is the happiest country in the world, but I will go through the methodology. Essentially, what they're looking at is asking people a number of fluffy questions. There were also some very, very hard statistics that they looked at, which is the GDP per capita. In other words, how much of the economy is actually filtering down into the average person. But apart from that, there was a lot of fluffy things that they looked at. How happy are you? How confident do you feel about freedom of speech, freedom of politics within a particular country? And where I live at the moment, we are #1 in Asia. Singapore is the #1 happiest country in Asia. It doesn't actually sort of figure in the grand scale, because I mean, they looked at 140 different countries, but to put you out of your misery, Jeff, the happiest country in the world is Finland. Finland is the happiest country in the world, followed by, drum roll, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, right? So it's all these Nordic countries which seem to be the happiest in the world. I don't understand why. I'm sure the people there are relatively happy, but I think it's this kind of social compact that they have over there. In many of the Scandinavian countries, they've been working for years to ensure that people are always included. And it is that inclusiveness that people feel that makes them happy. And countries where people feel somehow excluded are probably less happy. Surprisingly, America dropped out of the top 20. They're no longer in the top 20. Australia has been promoted into the top 20. New Zealand is one place below that at 21. So it's on both sides of the world. Over in Australia and New Zealand, people are happy. Over in the Scandinavian Nordic countries, people are very happy also. It's an interesting concept, really, happiness.
Yeah.
What really is quite surprising, Jack, is that young people are the least happy of all. Yeah. Whereas the older you get, the happier you become. And people said, why is that? Why are young people so unhappy, and yet the older people are happier? And I think it boils down to a couple of things. First one, I think young people feel quite excluded at the moment because older people, they've got on the housing ladder, 20, 30 years ago. They have their homes around them and they don't feel any kind of pressure there. Whereas the young people feel this enormous amount of pressure of trying to get on the housing ladder. And no matter how hard they try, many young people don't seem to be able to achieve that. That, I think, is number one. Number two, and maybe I'm generalizing here, older people tend to spend less time on social media, whereas the younger people spend an awful lot of time on social media. And so therefore, they are always comparing themselves with other people, not only the people within their own country, but people elsewhere. And they say, I shouldn't be happy because I don't have the things that other people have. And I think is one thing that is making young people happy. So I would like to call for a ban on all social media altogether and stop young people from going on social media so they can get involved in things. When I grew up, I didn't have social media, Jeff. I mean, what did I have? I had things like Lego. I had Meccano sets, which people are going, what the heck is a Meccano set, right? That kept me occupied, whereas young people just spend, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 hours a day on their phone having a look at, scrolling through all the various things and saying, I don't seem to be as thin as this person. I don't seem to be as attractive as this other person. And I think that is really what makes you unhappy. Look at me, Jeff. I mean, I wear the same shirt, show in, show out.
I know that you probably have 7 white shirts, David. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's. But I'll tell that to my 2 daughters. Although I think they'll agree with you on most things. They're in their early to mid 20s. I think that social media one might be a bridge too far for them. I don't think they'll be able to conceive of a world without they don't call them phones. They call them devices, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I'm showing my age there.
There we go. It's interesting, actually. It's interesting because as a New Zealander, I'm not quite sure. They officially went into a recession today. I'm not quite sure they'll be 21 anymore. And I used to work in Denmark, in Copenhagen, which was a marvelous city. And Denmark used to constantly win that World Happiness Survey. And I was always a little confused. They weren't unhappy, but they weren't walking around with smiles on their face, particularly in the middle of the Danish winter.
Well, Samantha looks very happy at the moment, so therefore she's either gone past the Gen Z category, which I don't really want to delve into. I think I've said too much already about that. Or alternatively, maybe she's just a generally a very happy person by nature. Yeah, and I think there are some people like that. I look at life and I just think, the glass is always half full; it's never half empty.
Perhaps it's because she's becoming much more adept at dealing with old people like us.
Maybe. We're rubbing off on her, I think.
Yes.
Dave, I definitely agree with you about social media because I'm completely off social media now and I have become a more happier person, definitely.
There you go. I rest my case.
All right. Okay. So, David, thanks again for your insight. It's always good to have you on the show. We've been speaking to David Kuo, founder of the Smart Investor in Singapore, on BizTech Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Samantha Voon.
And I'm the old Jeffrey Halley.
And this video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztechasia, and social media platforms. It will also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thank you for tuning in.